My name is Margaret, and I'm 34 years old. Right now, I'm standing in the marble lobby of the Grand Heritage Hotel, a five-star property I purchased 6 months ago for $11.2 million. Tomorrow is my sister Paula's wedding, and she has no idea that the venue she's been bragging about belongs to me. The same sister who called me ugly and useless my entire life. The same family who laughed at my scars and treated me like I was invisible. They had no idea what was coming. Before I tell you how I got here, let me know where you're watching from and don't forget to hit that like button. This story about family betrayal and ultimate revenge is just getting started. I wasn't always the forgotten daughter. Growing up in Columbus, Ohio, I was actually the golden child in our middle-class family. My father Robert worked as an accountant at a local firm making around $60,000 a year. My mother Dorothy was a registered nurse at Ohio State Medical Center, bringing in another $55,000. We lived in a modest three-bedroom ranch house on Maple Street. Nothing fancy but comfortable enough. Paula was 3 years younger than me, and back then we were close. I was the responsible older sister who helped her with homework and protected her from neighborhood bullies. I excelled in school, particularly in mathematics and science. My teachers constantly praised my analytical mind and problem-solving abilities. Our parents were proud, calling me their little genius at family gatherings. Everything changed when I turned 12. It was a cold February evening when our kitchen caught fire. Mom had left a pot of oil on the stove while helping Paula with her art project. I smelled smoke first and ran to the kitchen, finding flames spreading rapidly across the countertop. Paula had followed me and was frozen in terror near the doorway. Without thinking, I pushed her out of the way and grabbed the fire extinguisher from under the sink. The burning oil splattered across my left arm and the left side of my face before I could escape. The pain was indescribable, like thousands of needles piercing my skin simultaneously. I spent 3 weeks in the hospital undergoing multiple skin grafts and treatments. The doctors did their best, but the scarring was extensive. Raised, discolored tissue covered my left cheek, extending from my ear to my chin. My left arm bore similar marks from my wrist to my elbow. When I finally returned home, everything felt different. The way my parents looked at me had changed. There was pity in their eyes where pride used to be. Paula, on the other hand, emerged from the incident completely unharmed and somehow more beautiful than before. She had always been pretty, but now her unblemished skin seemed to glow in comparison to my damaged appearance. The shift in family dynamics became painfully obvious during our daily dinner conversations. Paula would excitedly share stories about her day at school, how her teacher, Mrs. Anderson, complimented her drawing skills, or how she made a new friend during recess. Mom and Dad would listen with genuine enthusiasm, asking follow-up questions and praising her social abilities. When I tried to share my own achievements, like scoring perfect on a math test or being selected for the advanced reading group, the response was lukewarm at best. Dad would nod absently while cutting his meatloaf, and Mom would offer a brief, "That's nice, honey," before turning her attention back to Paula. The financial priorities shifted too. Paula's art supplies, dance lessons, and piano classes suddenly became essential expenses. My requests for science books or math competition entry fees were met with sighs and comments about the family budget being tight. Yet somehow there was always money for Paula's activities. I remember one particular evening when Paula came home with a certificate for winning the school's poster contest. Mom immediately hung it on the refrigerator, calling Dad over to admire it. Later that same week, I brought home notification that I'd been accepted into the state mathematics competition. I placed the letter on the kitchen counter, expecting similar excitement. Mom glanced at it briefly and said, "That's nice, Margaret," before returning to help Paula practice her dance routine. The most painful moment came during a dinner with our neighbors, the Johnsons. Mrs. Johnson was complimenting both Paula and me, mentioning how lucky our parents were to have such talented daughters. Mom smiled warmly and said, "Paula is definitely our pride and joy. She brings such light into our home." Then, almost as an afterthought, she added, "Margaret is different now. She's become very focused on her studies." I felt my chest tighten as I realized that in my mother's eyes, I had become defined entirely by my scars and the way they made others uncomfortable. I wasn't Margaret the math whiz or Margaret the responsible big sister anymore. I was just Margaret the damaged one. High school intensified everything I'd experienced in middle school. I threw myself into academics with fierce determination, maintaining a perfect 4.0 GPA while serving as captain of the math team and treasurer of the National Honor Society. I participated in every academic competition available, winning state recognition in mathematics, science, and debate. Paula, meanwhile, blossomed into the social butterfly our parents had always encouraged her to become. She was elected homecoming queen during her sophomore year, dated the quarterback Bruce Patterson, and seemed to float through the hallways surrounded by admirers. Her grades were mediocre at best, hovering around a 2.7 average, but our parents dismissed academic concerns as unimportant compared to her social success. The constant comparisons became a daily torture. At breakfast, Mom would comment on Paula's outfit choices, praising her sense of style and natural beauty. When I wore my carefully saved-for blazer to the academic awards ceremony, the same blazer I'd worked after-school jobs to afford Dad barely glanced up from his newspaper. "Why can't you be more social like Paula?" Mom asked one morning after Paula left for school with her usual entourage of friends. "She brings home such nice kids. They're always so polite and cheerful." I wanted to scream that my academic teammates were equally polite and accomplished, but I'd learned that defending myself only led to lectures about attitude problems and jealousy. The most devastating incident occurred during my junior year. Dennis Coleman, a sweet boy from my chemistry class, had worked up the courage to ask me to the winter formal. He was shy like me, more interested in books than sports, and one of the few people who seemed genuinely interested in my thoughts and opinions. When he asked me to the dance, I felt a flutter of hope that maybe someone could see past my scars to the person underneath. I saved every penny from my tutoring jobs to buy a dress, spending hours researching hairstyles that might minimize the visibility of my facial scars. For the first time in years, I felt excited about a social event. The night before the dance, Paula cornered Dennis at his locker. I watched from down the hallway as she leaned in close, her blonde hair catching the fluorescent lights. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I saw Dennis's face fall, his shoulders slump, and his eyes dart nervously in my direction. 20 minutes later, Dennis approached my locker with obvious reluctance. "Margaret, I'm really sorry, but I can't take you to the dance tomorrow. Something's come up with my family." I knew he was lying. I could see it in his inability to meet my eyes, the way his hands fidgeted with his backpack straps. But I also knew that pushing for the truth would only increase my humiliation. That evening at dinner, Asala casually mentioned running into Dennis at school. "Poor guy seemed really stressed about something," she said with false concern. "I hope he works out whatever's bothering him." The cruelty was breathtaking. Not only had she destroyed my one chance at a normal teenage experience, but she was gloating about it in front of our parents, who remained completely oblivious to her manipulation. When I tried to explain what had happened, Dad interrupted me with a sigh. "Margaret, you need to be realistic about these situations. High school social events aren't really your thing anyway. You're much better with books than boys." Mom nodded in agreement. "Some people are meant for academic success, others for social success. You should focus on your strengths." The message was clear. I should accept my role as the smart but undesirable daughter and stop attempting to participate in normal teenage experiences. My academic achievements continued to be minimized or ignored entirely. When I won the state mathematics competition, bringing home a trophy and a $5,000 scholarship, our parents skipped the award ceremony because Paula had cheerleading practice. The trophy sat on my bedroom shelf, never displayed in the family common areas like Paula's countless participation ribbons and homecoming photos. The financial discrimination became more blatant as college approached. Initially, our parents had established equal college funds for both Paula and me, each containing approximately $30,000 accumulated over the years. However, as junior year progressed, I discovered they had quietly transferred $21,000 from my fund to Paula's account. When I confronted them about this discovery, Dad explained it matter-of-factly. Paula has more opportunities available to her. She'll likely receive invitations to sororities, participate in campus social activities, maybe even find a good husband. These things require financial investment. What about my academic opportunities? I asked. What about graduate school or professional development? Mom waved dismissively. You're smart enough to earn scholarships. Paula needs our help more because she doesn't have your advantages. It was a twisted logic that somehow framed my intelligence as a privilege that negated my need for family support, while Paula's beauty and popularity were treated as responsibilities requiring financial backing. I started tutoring more aggressively, taking on every student I could manage while maintaining my own perfect grades. I was earning decent money, usually between $800 and $1,200 per month, which I carefully saved for college expenses. However, even this independent income became a source of family exploitation. Dad started asking for temporary loans to cover household expenses, always promising to pay me back by the next month. Mom suggested I contribute to Paula's prom expenses since family members should help each other during special occasions. When I hesitated to hand over money I'd earned through my own hard work, I was labeled selfish and ungrateful. After everything we've done for you, Mom would say, this is how you show appreciation. The breaking point came during a family meeting about college planning. I'd been accepted to Ohio State University with a partial academic scholarship, but still needed financial support for room board and remaining tuition costs. Paula had barely managed to get accepted to a private liberal arts college 3 hours away with no scholarships and tuition costs, nearly double those of state schools. Dad spread our financial documents across the kitchen table, explaining his decision with the enthusiasm of someone announcing good news. We've decided that Paula should attend Whitman College to maximize her potential. Margaret, you're intelligent enough to succeed at a community college for the first 2 years, then transfer to complete your degree. I stared at the papers, calculating quickly. Paula's education would cost approximately $160,000 over 4 years. My proposed community college path would cost around $15,000 for the first 2 years, with an additional $30,000 for the final 2 years at a state university. You're giving her 3 times the educational investment, I said quietly. Dad nodded as if this were perfectly reasonable. Investment should go where it's most likely to produce returns. Paula has social skills and personality traits that will help her succeed in life. Your path is more academic, less expensive. I realized in that moment that my own parents viewed me as a less worthy investment than my beautiful, mediocre sister. The scars on my face had somehow damaged my value as a human being in their eyes. College became my liberation and my launching pad. I attended Ohio State University, funding my education through a combination of academic scholarships, student loans, and the money I'd managed to save from tutoring. For the first time in years, I was surrounded by people who valued intelligence and hard work over superficial qualities. My dorm mate Elena was a computer science major from California, who became my first real friend. She never asked about my scars, never treated me differently because of my appearance. Instead, she was fascinated by my mathematical abilities and business instincts. I double majored in finance and computer science, maintaining a 3.9 GPA, while working 20 hours per week at various campus jobs. My professors recognized my potential, often staying after class to discuss advanced concepts or research opportunities. During my sophomore year, I noticed a significant gap in the tutoring market. Most tutoring services were either expensive in-person sessions or low-quality online platforms. I developed a hybrid model, an online platform that connected students with qualified tutors for live video sessions at affordable rates. Building the platform required learning web development, which I did through online courses and countless late nights in the computer lab. Elena helped with the technical architecture, while I handled the business planning and financial projections. We launched Academic Bridge in January of my sophomore year with just 12 tutors and 37 students. By May, we had expanded to 86 tutors, serving over 400 students across 3 universities. The platform generated $15,000 in profit during its first semester of operation. My family's reaction to this success was predictably dismissive. During one of my rare visits home, I excitedly explained the business model and showed them our growing user statistics. Dad glanced at my laptop screen with mild interest before turning back to his television program. "Playing with computers isn't real work like Paula's internships," he commented. "She's gaining actual professional experience in the real world." Paula was indeed completing internships, though her experiences were more social than professional. She'd somehow secured a position at a local marketing firm primarily because the manager was friends with Bruce's father. Her responsibilities mainly involved organizing office events and managing social media accounts, tasks that required minimal skill or creativity. Meanwhile, my computer games were generating enough revenue to cover my entire college expenses without requiring any family financial support. I was reinvesting profits into expanding the platform and had started consulting for other small businesses about their online presence. During my junior year, I made my first major breakthrough. A regional hotel chain was struggling with their booking system, losing thousands of dollars annually due to inefficient reservation management. I developed a comprehensive software solution that streamlined their operations, reduced double bookings by 95%, and increased their online conversion rate by 38%. They purchased my software package for $125,000, plus ongoing maintenance fees of $2,000 monthly. At 20 years old, I had earned more money in a single transaction than my father made in 2 years. The success felt surreal. I deposited the check staring at my bank balance in disbelief. For the first time in my life, I had true financial independence. No more begging for family support, no more justifying my expenses, no more being treated as the less valuable daughter. When I shared this achievement during Thanksgiving dinner, the family's response was telling. Mom pursed her lips and said, "That's a lot of money for someone your age. I hope you're being responsible with it." Paula rolled her eyes. "Margaret always has to make everything about money and business. Can't we just have a normal family conversation?" Dad nodded in agreement. "Success isn't just about making money, Margaret. Paula's learning important social skills and building relationships that will serve her throughout life." I wanted to point out that my software was helping real businesses solve genuine problems, creating value for hundreds of employees and thousands of customers. But I'd learned that defending my accomplishments only led to accusations of arrogance and showing off. The most painful incident occurred during my senior year Thanksgiving visit. I brought my laptop to work on a new project, a hotel management system that could potentially revolutionize how smaller properties handled their operations. I'd been developing it for months, and the prototype was nearly complete. Paula had been drinking wine throughout the afternoon, celebrating her recent engagement to Kenneth Morrison, a law student she'd met at a fraternity party. As I worked at the kitchen table, carefully testing the final features of my software, Paula stumbled slightly and reached for her wine glass. Whether intentionally or accidentally, she knocked over the entire glass, sending red wine cascading across my laptop keyboard. The liquid seeped into the circuits, instantly destroying months of work and corrupting my backup files. "Oops," Paula giggled, not making any effort to help clean up the mess. "Sorry about that. Maybe you shouldn't always be working during family time." I watched my laptop screen flicker and die, knowing that I'd lost countless hours of programming and potentially lucrative intellectual property. The financial loss was significant, but the emotional betrayal cut deeper. Mom handed me a dish towel with obvious irritation. "Margaret, you know better than to bring work materials to family gatherings. This is what happens when you don't pay attention to your surroundings." Dad shook his head in disapproval. "Always working, never present with family. No wonder these accidents happen." I realized they were actually blaming me for Paula's destruction of my property. In their minds, I deserved to have my work ruined because I'd committed the crime of being productive during a family gathering. That night, I made a decision that would shape the rest of my life. I would continue building my business empire, but I would never again seek approval or recognition from my family. Their validation was not necessary for my success. By graduation, I had expanded my software business significantly. The hotel management system rebuilt from scratch after Paula's wine incident was generating interest from property owners across the Midwest. I graduated summa cum laude with job offers from 3 major technology companies and a growing portfolio of rental properties purchased with my business profits. Paula's graduation took place the same weekend as mine. Despite my academic honors and business achievements, our parents chose to attend her ceremony instead. Paula barely passed her requirements with a 2.1 GPA, having spent most of senior year planning her wedding, rather than focusing on coursework. I attended my own graduation ceremony alone, walking across the stage to receive my diploma with no family members present to witness the moment. But as I shook the dean's hand and accepted my degree, I felt a profound sense of personal victory. I had succeeded entirely through my own efforts without family support or encouragement. My post-college career accelerated rapidly. I accepted a position at Technova, a growing startup specializing in business automation software. My starting salary of $78,000 was more than my father had ever earned, and within 18 months, I'd been promoted to senior systems developer, with a compensation package exceeding $110,000 annually. But my real wealth was building through real estate investments and my expanding software consulting business. I purchased my first rental property during my second month at Technova, a modest duplex in a transitioning neighborhood that I renovated during weekends. The rental income covered the mortgage payments plus an additional $400 monthly profit. By the end of my first year, I owned 3 rental properties and had flipped 2 houses for substantial profits. My software consulting clients had grown to include hotel chains, restaurants, and small manufacturing companies throughout Ohio and Indiana. The business was generating between $8,000 and $12,000 monthly in additional income. Paula, meanwhile, had moved back home after college and was cycling through various entry-level positions. She'd quit her first job at a marketing agency after 3 months, claiming the work was boring. Her second position at a boutique lasted 6 weeks before she decided retail wasn't suitable for someone with her education level. Our parents supported her job hopping, explaining to anyone who asked that Paula was simply exploring her options and finding the right career fit. They provided her with free housing, meals, car insurance, and spending money, while she figured out her professional direction. During this period, my contact with family was minimal and usually initiated by them only when they needed something. I'd established a successful routine work at Technova during the day, manage my real estate properties and consulting clients during evenings and weekends, and invest every possible dollar into expanding my portfolio. Then came the phone call that changed everything. It was a Tuesday evening in March when Dad called, his voice strained and unusually humble. "Margaret, we need to talk to you about something important. Can you come home this weekend?" I sensed crisis in his tone but agreed to visit. When I arrived Saturday morning, both parents were waiting in the living room with stacks of financial documents spread across the coffee table. Mom's eyes were red-rimmed, and Dad looked like he'd aged 5 years since my last visit. "We're in trouble," Dad began without preamble. "I made some bad investment decisions last year. Put too much money into a business opportunity that turned out to be a scam. We're facing foreclosure on the house." He explained that he'd invested $47,000 of their retirement savings into a precious metals scheme that had collapsed. Additionally, he'd taken out a home equity loan to fund the investment, leaving them with a total debt of $85,000 they couldn't repay. "The bank has started foreclosure proceedings," Mom added quietly. "We have 60 days to bring the account current, or we lose everything." I studied their financial documents, calculating quickly. Their combined income could barely cover basic living expenses, let alone the massive debt payments. They'd been living paycheck to paycheck for months, borrowing against credit cards to make minimum house payments. "What about Paula?" I asked. "Is she contributing to household expenses?" Dad and Mom exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Paula's still finding her career path," Mom explained. "It wouldn't be fair to burden her with our financial problems when she's trying to establish herself professionally." I almost laughed at the absurdity. Paula was 28 years old, living rent-free in their home with all her expenses covered by parents who were facing bankruptcy. Yet somehow asking her to contribute financially would be unfair. "We know you've been doing well with your computer business," Dad continued. "We were hoping you might be able to help us through this difficult time. Just temporarily, until we get back on our feet." It was the first time in over a decade that my parents had acknowledged my financial success, and only because they needed my money. They'd spent years dismissing my achievements as unimportant, but now those same achievements represented their salvation. I looked around the living room where I'd grown up, remembering all the times I'd been made to feel unwelcome in my own home. The family photos lining the mantel told the story clearly, dozens of pictures featuring Paula at various social events, school activities, and family gatherings. I appeared in maybe 3 photos, always positioned awkwardly at the edge of the group. "I'll help you," I said finally. "But I have conditions." Dad leaned forward eagerly. "Of course, anything you need. First, you acknowledge publicly that I've built a successful business and achieved financial independence through my own hard work. Second, you treat me with the same respect and pride you show Paula. Third, Paula starts contributing to household expenses like any adult living in your home." Mom nodded quickly. "Yes, absolutely. We should have recognized your accomplishments years ago. We're proud of what you've built." Their sudden change in attitude felt hollow, motivated entirely by financial desperation rather than genuine recognition. But I was curious to see if they could maintain this new perspective once their crisis passed. I transferred $85,000 the following Monday, paying off their debt completely and saving their house from foreclosure. The relief in their voices during our phone conversation was palpable. For approximately 3 weeks, they kept their promises. Dad mentioned my business success to neighbors and friends, Mom asked about my work projects with apparent interest, and Paula grudgingly agreed to pay $300 monthly for room and board. Then the old patterns reasserted themselves, like water finding its natural level. Paula convinced our parents that her job search was being hindered by the stress of paying rent, so they waived her financial contribution. Dad stopped mentioning my achievements and returned to discussing Paula's various career prospects with enthusiasm. Mom resumed her habit of calling Paula 3 times weekly while contacting me only when she needed technical support for her computer. The final insult came 6 months later when Paula announced her engagement to Kenneth Morrison. I learned about it through a Facebook post, rather than a family phone call. The engagement ring was clearly expensive, a 2-carat diamond that probably cost more than most people's annual salary. Paula's social media posts gushed about Kenneth's family wealth and their plans for an elaborate wedding. She posted photos of potential venues, all upscale locations, with price tags exceeding $100,000 for a single event. 2 weeks after the engagement announcement, Mom called with barely contained excitement. "Paula's getting married next spring. We're so thrilled. Kenneth comes from such a successful family." She proceeded to detail their wedding planning progress, describing the venue, flowers, catering, and entertainment with the enthusiasm of someone planning their own dream event. Finally, almost as an afterthought, she mentioned the financial aspect. "The wedding will be quite expensive, but it's a once-in-a-lifetime event. We're hoping family members might want to contribute to making Paula's dream wedding possible." I understood immediately. They expected me to fund a significant portion of Paula's wedding expenses, just as I'd saved their house from foreclosure. My money was welcome, but my presence and opinions remained irrelevant. "How much are you expecting me to contribute?" I asked directly. Mom seemed surprised by my bluntness. Well, we thought maybe $30 or $40,000 would be appropriate. Family should help family during special occasions. $40,000. More than my father's annual salary when I was growing up. More than they'd contributed to my entire college education. They wanted me to pay for Paula's party while continuing to treat me as the family disappointment. I'm not contributing to the wedding, I said calmly. The silence stretched for several seconds before Mom responded. What do you mean? This is your sister's wedding, Margaret. Family members support each other. The same way you supported my education. The same way you supported my business when I was starting out. The same way you acknowledged my achievements over the years. That's different, Mom replied, her voice becoming defensive. We've always supported you in our own way. You're just being difficult because you're jealous of Paula's happiness. I'm not jealous, I said. I'm just tired of being treated like an ATM with legs. That phrase triggered an explosion of family rage that had been building for months. Dad got on the phone, his voice tight with anger. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us. We raised you, fed you, gave you a home for 18 years. We helped you become the person you are today. You helped me? I almost laughed. You've spent my entire adult life dismissing my achievements and minimizing my success. You only contact me when you need money. You've never once expressed genuine pride in what I've built. Paula grabbed the phone at that point, her voice shrill with indignation. You're being incredibly selfish, Margaret. This is supposed to be the happiest time of my life, and you're ruining it with your bitterness. I'm not ruining anything, I replied. I'm simply declining to fund your party. It's not just a party, Paula shrieked. It's my wedding, the most important day of my life. But you're too jealous and ugly to care about anyone else's happiness. The word ugly hit like a physical blow, bringing back decades of pain and self-consciousness about my scars. But it was Mom's next comment that truly shattered my heart. No wonder you're alone, Margaret, she said coldly. Who would want someone so ugly and useless? At least Paula brings joy into people's lives. Dad's voice joined the attack. You've become bitter and selfish. Money has made you think you're better than your family. After everything we've done for you, this is how you show gratitude. I hung up the phone and sat in my apartment, shaking with a combination of rage and heartbreak. These people who were supposed to love me unconditionally had just confirmed every fear I'd harbored about my worth as a human being. But as the initial shock wore off, it was replaced by something much more powerful: determination. They thought I was ugly and useless. They thought I was bitter and alone. I would show them exactly how wrong they were. The plan formed gradually over the following weeks as I researched Paula's wedding arrangements. She'd been posting constant updates about her venue selection process, eventually choosing the Grand Heritage Hotel, a 5-star property in downtown Columbus, that she described as absolutely perfect and exactly what I've always dreamed of. The Grand Heritage was indeed spectacular. Built in 1923, it had been meticulously maintained and featured elegant ballrooms, luxury accommodations, and impeccable service. It was also extremely expensive, with wedding packages starting at $25,000 and climbing rapidly from there. Paula's social media posts revealed that Kenneth's family was supposedly funding the venue costs, allowing her to book the premium package, including the grand ballroom, cocktail reception area, bridal suite, and catering for 200 guests. The total cost would exceed $75,000 just for the venue and basic services. But something nagged at me about this arrangement. I'd researched Kenneth's background, and while his family was comfortable, they weren't wealthy enough to casually spend $75,000 on a single event. His father was a mid-level manager at an insurance company, and his mother worked part-time as a substitute teacher. I started investigating the Grand Heritage's financial situation and discovered they were struggling significantly. The pandemic had devastated the hospitality industry, and despite their prestigious reputation, they were facing serious cash flow problems. Occupancy rates remained low. Corporate events had been canceled indefinitely, and maintenance costs were mounting. After weeks of careful research and financial analysis, I learned that the hotel's current owners were actively seeking a buyer. The property was valued at approximately $12 million, but they were motivated to sell quickly and might accept an offer in the $11 million range. I spent sleepless nights running calculations, evaluating the investment potential, and imagining the possibilities. The Grand Heritage had excellent bones prime downtown location, historic charm, established reputation, and loyal staff. With proper management and strategic improvements, it could become highly profitable again. More importantly, purchasing the hotel would give me the perfect platform for confronting my family's years of disrespect and cruelty. I liquidated several rental properties, cashed out investment accounts, and secured a commercial loan backed by my real estate portfolio. The financing came together surprisingly quickly thanks to my excellent credit history and the hotel's strong underlying value. In November, 6 months before Paula's scheduled wedding, I purchased the Grand Heritage Hotel for $11.2 million. The transaction was completed through a limited liability company I'd established specifically for the acquisition, keeping my personal involvement hidden from public records. The hotel staff had no idea about the ownership change initially. I worked with the existing management team, implementing gradual improvements without disrupting daily operations. I upgraded their property management software, enhanced their online booking system, and provided additional staff training focused on customer service excellence. Meanwhile, Paula's wedding planning continued with increasing excitement and extravagance. She posted photos of menu tastings, floral arrangements, and dress fittings, constantly mentioning how grateful she was that Kenneth's family was making her dream wedding possible. I wondered what Kenneth thought about this supposed family generosity, especially since I knew his parents couldn't afford such lavish spending. But that mystery would resolve itself soon enough. 3 months before the wedding, I quietly arranged to have the hotel's general manager position filled by Gerald Patterson, an experienced hospitality professional I'd worked with at my previous consulting projects. Gerald was one of the few people who knew about my ownership of the property. I also reserved the hotel's presidential suite for the weekend of Paula's wedding, ostensibly as a regular guest booking. The suite occupied the entire top floor and featured panoramic city views, a private elevator, and luxurious amenities that would provide the perfect staging area for my reveal. As Paula's wedding approached, her social media activity reached fever pitch. She posted multiple daily updates about final preparations, constantly emphasizing the exclusive nature of her venue and the sophistication of her celebration. She seemed particularly proud that her wedding would be held at one of the city's most prestigious hotels. 2 weeks before the wedding, I received an invitation in the mail. The envelope was addressed in Paula's careful handwriting, and despite everything that had happened between us, seeing my name written in her familiar script triggered an unexpected wave of nostalgia. The invitation itself was elegant and expensive, printed on heavy cardstock with gold foil accents. Mr. and Mrs. Robert Thompson request the honor of your presence at the marriage of their daughter, Paula Marie Thompson, to Kenneth James Morrison. At the bottom, someone had handwritten a note. We hope you can attend despite recent family tensions. Paula wants all family members present for her special day. I understood the subtext immediately. They needed me there for appearances to maintain the illusion of family unity in front of Paula's new in-laws and social circle. My presence would demonstrate that their family was close-knit and supportive, even if they continued treating me poorly behind closed doors. I RSVP'd that I would attend, though I didn't mention my alternative accommodations or special relationship with the venue. As far as my family knew, I would be just another wedding guest, probably sitting in the back row and leaving early to avoid awkward conversations. The final month passed quickly as I finalized preparations for my surprise reveal. I coordinated with Gerald to ensure flawless service for the wedding while setting up subtle indicators of my ownership status. The hotel staff received instructions to address me formally when I appeared as a guest, and I prepared documentation proving my ownership in case anyone questioned my claims. I also used this time to reflect on my motivations. Was I seeking revenge for years of mistreatment, or was I simply trying to prove my worth to people whose opinions shouldn't matter? Perhaps it was both. Or perhaps it was something deeper, a need to finally stand up for myself and demand the respect I'd always deserved. Either way, Paula's wedding would mark the end of my family's ability to treat me as inferior. They would finally see me as I truly was, successful, powerful, and completely independent of their approval or support. Saturday morning arrived with perfect May weather, sunny and 72 degrees with a gentle breeze. I checked into the presidential suite early, using the private elevator to avoid encountering any family members in the main lobby. From my floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see wedding vendors arriving throughout the morning, florists carrying elaborate arrangements, caterers wheeling in supplies, and musicians setting up equipment in the ballroom. Gerald met me in the suite at 10 o'clock to review final arrangements. "Everything is proceeding smoothly," he reported. "The bride's family arrived an hour ago and seems very pleased with the accommodations. Your sister specifically mentioned how impressed she was with the service quality." I smiled at the irony. Paula was enjoying the improved service standards I'd implemented over the past 6 months, never knowing that her despised older sister was responsible for the enhanced experience. "How are they handling the billing arrangements?" I asked. Gerald's expression became slightly uncomfortable. "Actually, there seems to be some confusion about payment. The groom's family appeared surprised when we mentioned final payment due today. They seemed to think someone else was handling the financial aspects." This confirmed my suspicions about Kenneth's family's supposed funding of the wedding. Paula had clearly been lying about who was paying for the elaborate celebration, probably hoping the financial details would work themselves out somehow. I spent the morning observing the wedding preparations from my suite's private balcony. Paula arrived at noon in a white limousine surrounded by 6 bridesmaids in lavender dresses. Even from a distance, I could see her radiant smile as she posed for photographs in front of the hotel's grand entrance. Mom and Dad flanked her proudly, both dressed in expensive formal wear that probably cost more than they could afford. They were clearly trying to project an image of prosperity and sophistication for Kenneth's family and the other wedding guests. At 2 o'clock, I began my own preparations. I'd purchased a stunning navy blue designer dress from Nordstrom, along with professional makeup and hairstyling. The makeup artist I'd hired was skilled at using concealer and contouring techniques to minimize the visibility of my facial scars, and the hairstylist created an elegant updo that drew attention to my eyes, rather than my damaged cheek. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. The woman staring back appeared confident, successful, and undeniably beautiful despite her scars. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely attractive. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 o'clock in the hotel's garden courtyard, followed by cocktails and dinner in the grand ballroom. I planned to make my entrance during the cocktail hour, when all the guests would be mingling and my arrival would create maximum impact. At 3:45, I watched from my balcony as the wedding ceremony began. Paula looked stunning in her white gown, and Kenneth appeared genuinely happy as he waited at the altar. Despite everything that had happened between us, I felt a moment of genuine hope that my sister would find happiness in her marriage. The ceremony concluded with enthusiastic applause and the traditional recessional. Guests moved toward the hotel for cocktails, while the wedding party remained outside for photographs. I used this transition time to take the private elevator down to the main floor. Gerald was waiting near the ballroom entrance when I arrived. "Are you ready for this?" he asked quietly. I nodded, feeling surprisingly calm despite the magnitude of what I was about to do. "Let's proceed as planned." The cocktail hour was in full swing when I entered the ballroom. The space looked magnificent, decorated with white roses, crystal chandeliers, and elegant linens. Approximately 150 guests were mingling with drinks and appetizers, creating a festive atmosphere. I moved through the crowd, slowly noting several familiar faces from my childhood, but avoiding direct contact until the right moment. Most guests seemed to be Kenneth's family and friends, well-dressed professionals, who appeared genuinely happy to celebrate the couple's marriage. My own family was clustered near the bar, clearly trying to project confidence and sophistication. Dad wore a rented tuxedo that didn't quite fit properly, while Mom had chosen a dress that was slightly too formal for the afternoon event. They were engaged in animated conversation with an older couple I assumed were Kenneth's parents. Paula and Kenneth made their grand entrance at 5:30, greeted with applause and cheers from their guests. Paula was glowing with happiness, clearly loving being the center of attention. Kenneth seemed more reserved but pleased as they moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations. I waited until 6 o'clock when dinner service was beginning and most guests were finding their assigned tables. This was the perfect moment for maximum visibility and impact. I approached Gerald near the main entrance, ensuring our conversation would be visible to most of the wedding guests. "Gerald," I said in a clear voice that carried across the ballroom, "I wanted to personally thank you for ensuring everything is perfect tonight." Gerald responded exactly as we'd rehearsed. "Of course, Ms. Thompson. We're honored to host your sister's wedding at your hotel." The effect was immediate and dramatic. Conversation stopped mid-sentence as guests processed what they'd just heard. Heads turned in my direction, and I could see confusion spreading across faces throughout the ballroom. Kenneth's father approached us first, his expression puzzled. "Excuse me, did I hear correctly? This is your hotel." I smiled graciously and extended my hand. "Yes, I'm Margaret Thompson, Paula's older sister and owner of the Grand Heritage Hotel. I wanted to ensure my sister's wedding was absolutely perfect." The older man's face went through several expressions as he processed this information. "But we were told that, Kenneth's mother and I thought." Paula had obviously told Kenneth's family that they were funding the wedding venue, when in reality she'd had no way to pay for the elaborate celebration. The financial arrangements had been left deliberately vague, probably hoping that someone else would handle the bill. By this point, the commotion had attracted attention from across the ballroom. My parents were pushing through the crowd, their faces a mixture of shock and horror as they realized what was happening. Paula appeared at Kenneth's side, her wedding glow rapidly fading as she understood the implications of my presence and Gerald's announcement. "Margaret," she said weakly, "what are you doing here?" "I'm attending my sister's wedding," I replied calmly. "At my hotel." The silence in the ballroom was deafening. 150 wedding guests were staring at our family drama, trying to understand the dynamics they were witnessing. Kenneth looked between Paula and me, his confusion evident. "Paula, you told me your family wasn't involved in paying for the venue. You said my parents were handling these costs." Paula's face flushed bright red. There must be some misunderstanding." Kenneth's mother stepped forward, her voice sharp with concern. "Kenneth, we never agreed to pay for the venue. We specifically discussed that we couldn't afford this level of expense." The financial deception was unraveling in front of the entire wedding party. Paula had apparently told multiple lies about who was funding her dream wedding, never expecting the truth to surface during the celebration itself. I decided to clarify the situation for everyone present. "There's no misunderstanding," I announced, my voice carrying clearly across the silent ballroom. "I purchased this hotel 6 months ago, specifically because I knew my sister had chosen it for her wedding venue. I wanted to ensure she had the perfect celebration despite our recent family difficulties." I removed the ownership documents from my purse, holding them visible for anyone who wanted verification. "I have the deed and purchase agreements right here if anyone would like confirmation." Gerald stepped forward to support my statement. "Ms. Thompson has been an excellent owner. She's invested significantly in property improvements and staff development over the past 6 months." The crowd's attention was completely focused on our family now, and I could see guests whispering among themselves as they tried to process the dramatic revelation. Dad finally found his voice, though it came out as a hoarse whisper. "Margaret, what is this about?" "This is about respect," I replied clearly. "This is about a daughter who saved her family's home from foreclosure, who built a successful business from nothing, who achieved everything she accomplished without any family support. This is about finally being acknowledged for who I really am." Mom stepped forward, her face pale with embarrassment. "We should discuss this privately." "We've had years to discuss this privately," I interrupted. You've had countless opportunities to treat me with basic respect and recognition. Instead, you've consistently dismissed my achievements while expecting me to fund your family emergencies. Kenneth was staring at Paula with growing realization. You lied to me about the wedding funding. What else have you lied about? Paula's carefully constructed facade was crumbling in real time. Kenneth, please, we can talk about this later. We'll talk about it now, Kenneth replied firmly. In front of everyone, since that's apparently how this family handles important conversations. I felt a moment of sympathy for Paula watching her dream wedding turn into a public confrontation. But then I remembered all the years of cruelty, all the times she'd belittled my appearance and achievements, all the moments when she'd stood by while our parents treated me as inferior. I want everyone here to understand something, I continued, addressing the entire ballroom. For the past 20 years, this family has treated me as if I were worthless, because of scars I received saving my sister from a house fire. They've mocked my appearance, dismissed my accomplishments, and only contacted me when they needed money. The gasps from the wedding guests were audible. This level of family dysfunction was clearly far beyond what they'd expected to witness at a wedding celebration. But despite their treatment, I built a software company, purchased multiple rental properties, and accumulated enough wealth to buy this $12 million hotel. I've employed dozens of people, solved real business problems, and achieved financial independence that most people never reach. I turned to face my parents directly. You called me ugly and useless. You said no one would ever want someone like me. But look around you. I own this building. I'm employing the staff serving your food tonight. I've achieved more in my 34 years than you've accomplished in your entire lives. Dad tried to interrupt, but I wasn't finished. The most pathetic part is that you still don't understand what you've lost. You had a daughter who would have given anything for your love and support. Instead, you chose to invest everything in superficial beauty and social status while ignoring genuine talent and determination. Kenneth turned to Paula, his voice cold with disappointment. Is this true? Did you really treat your sister this way? Paula was crying now, her perfect makeup streaming down her cheeks. You don't understand the whole situation. I understand enough, Kenneth replied. I understand that you lied to me about fundamental things. I understand that you've been cruel to someone who didn't deserve it. I understand that the woman I thought I was marrying doesn't actually exist. The ballroom had become completely silent except for Paula's sobbing. 150 wedding guests were witnessing the complete implosion of what was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. The immediate aftermath of my revelation created chaos that rippled through the ballroom like shockwaves. Kenneth walked away from Paula without another word, heading toward his parents, who were huddled in urgent conversation near the back of the room. Paula stood alone in her white gown, mascara streaming down her cheeks as she watched her new husband distance himself from her. My parents rushed toward me with desperate expressions, suddenly eager to repair a relationship they'd spent decades destroying. Margaret, sweetheart, there's been a terrible misunderstanding. Mom began, her voice artificially sweet. We've always been proud of you. We just didn't know how to express it properly. Dad nodded enthusiastically. Your mother's right. We always knew you were special. Maybe we didn't say it enough, but we always believed in your potential. Their sudden change in attitude was breathtaking in its transparency. Faced with public humiliation and the realization that I possessed genuine power and wealth, they were desperately trying to rewrite history. The same parents who'd called me ugly and useless just months earlier were now claiming they'd always supported me. Please don't do this here, Mom whispered urgently, glancing around at the staring wedding guests. We can work this out as a family. There's no need to air our private issues in front of everyone. I looked at these people who'd shaped my childhood with their neglect and cruelty, who'd taught me to believe I was fundamentally flawed and unworthy of love. Now they were begging for my discretion, asking me to protect their reputation after years of destroying my self-esteem. You're right, I said calmly. There's no need to continue this public conversation. The facts speak for themselves. I turned to address the wedding guests who were still processing the drama they'd witnessed. I apologize for disrupting what should have been a joyful celebration. Despite our family difficulties, I want to ensure that everyone enjoys the remainder of the evening. The dinner service will continue as planned, and the bar will remain open until midnight. Gerald stepped forward to support my statement. All guests are welcome to continue celebrating. The hotel staff will ensure excellent service throughout the evening. Kenneth's parents approached me cautiously, their expressions confused but respectful. Ms. Thompson, we appreciate your hospitality despite these difficult circumstances. We had no idea about the family situation or the payment arrangements. Kenneth's father extended his hand. I'm Richard Morrison, and this is my wife, Linda. We're genuinely sorry about the misunderstandings surrounding tonight's events. I shook their hands warmly. Please don't feel responsible for the financial confusion. Your son seems like a good man who deserves honesty in his relationships. Linda Morrison glanced toward Kenneth, who was standing alone near the windows overlooking the city. He's devastated right now. He really believed Paula was different from how she's appeared tonight. I felt genuine sympathy for Kenneth. He'd entered this marriage believing he knew his bride only to discover that she'd built their relationship on deception and hidden cruelty. The revelation of Paula's true character was probably more devastating than any financial irregularities. Give him time, I suggested quietly. Sometimes the most painful discoveries lead to the most important personal growth. Richard Morrison nodded thoughtfully. Your achievements are remarkable, especially considering the family obstacles you've faced. Building a successful business and acquiring property like this requires exceptional talent and determination. It was the first time in years that anyone from my family's social circle had acknowledged my accomplishments with genuine respect rather than dismissive surprise. The validation felt more meaningful than I'd expected. As the evening progressed, an interesting dynamic developed among the wedding guests. Many of Kenneth's family and friends approached me with curiosity about my business background and hotel ownership. They seemed genuinely impressed by my achievements and eager to hear about my entrepreneurial journey. Paula's friends, meanwhile, appeared uncomfortable and uncertain about how to respond to the evening's revelations. Several made polite excuses and left early, probably eager to escape the awkward family drama. My parents spent the dinner hour making increasingly desperate attempts to rebuild our relationship. They found excuses to approach my table repeatedly, sharing stories about how proud they'd always been of my intelligence and business acumen. Their revisionist history was so blatant that several nearby guests seemed amused by the obvious dishonesty. Paula, to her credit, eventually composed herself enough to make a brief speech acknowledging that the evening hadn't proceeded as planned. She thanked the guests for attending and asked for their understanding regarding the family situation. Kenneth stood beside her during the speech, but didn't hold her hand or show other signs of marital affection. Around 9 o'clock, Kenneth approached my table alone. Would you mind if I sat down for a few minutes? I'd like to understand what really happened here tonight. I gestured to the empty chair beside me. Of course. I imagine you're feeling confused about everything you've learned. Kenneth sat down heavily, looking emotionally exhausted. Paula told me your family wasn't close, but she made it sound like typical sibling rivalry. She never mentioned anything about scars or family cruelty. She definitely never said anything about you being successful enough to own hotels. What did she tell you about me? I asked, genuinely curious about Paula's version of our family dynamics. She said you were the smart one who focused on computers and stayed home a lot. She made it sound like you were antisocial and maybe a little jealous of her more active lifestyle. She never mentioned your business success or any serious family conflicts. I nodded, unsurprised by Paula's selective storytelling. Did she explain how she was funding tonight's celebration? Kenneth's expression became pained. She told me my parents had offered to pay for the venue as a wedding gift. When I asked my parents about it, they seemed confused, but assumed Paula had misunderstood some casual comment they'd made. We all thought the financial details would work themselves out somehow. So you had no idea about the actual costs involved. I knew this place was expensive, but Paula kept saying everything was handled. I trusted her because I thought I could trust her about important things. The betrayal in his voice was evident. Paula hadn't just lied about wedding funding, she'd undermined the foundation of trust necessary for a successful marriage. I'm sorry you're dealing with this on what should have been the happiest day of your life, I said sincerely. Kenneth looked around the elegant ballroom, taking in the expensive decorations and sophisticated ambiance. This really is your hotel. You actually own all of this. I purchased it 6 months ago as a business investment. Learning that Paula had chosen it for her wedding venue was convenient timing. She had no idea you owned it. None whatsoever. I kept the ownership private specifically because I wanted to see how tonight would unfold. Kenneth was quiet for several minutes, processing the full implications of what he'd learned. So you could have refused to host the wedding entirely. You could have left Paula scrambling to find an alternative venue. I could have, I agreed. But despite everything that's happened between us, she's still my sister. I wanted her to have the wedding she dreamed of, even if she didn't deserve my generosity. That's remarkably gracious considering how your family has treated you. I shrugged. Revenge wasn't really the point. I just wanted to finally be acknowledged for who I actually am rather than who they assumed I was. Kenneth stood up slowly, extending his hand once again. Thank you for your honesty and your hospitality. I hope you can find a way to rebuild healthy relationships with your family. I hope you can find happiness, whatever that looks like after tonight. He smiled sadly. I think I need to have some very serious conversations with my wife about honesty and family dynamics. As Kenneth walked away, I reflected on the evening's events and their likely consequences. Paula's marriage would probably survive, but it would require rebuilding trust from the ground up. My parents would continue their desperate attempts to repair our relationship, motivated primarily by my demonstrated wealth and success. And I would continue building my business empire, finally free from the need to seek their approval or validation. The hotel staff began clearing dinner plates as the evening wound down. Most guests had departed by 10:30, leaving only close family members and a few persistent friends. The grand ballroom that had been filled with celebration just hours earlier now felt cavernous and somewhat melancholy. I spent a few minutes speaking with Gerald about the evening's service quality and any operational issues that had arisen. Despite the family drama, the hotel staff had maintained professional standards throughout the event. How do you think this will affect our reputation? Gerald asked with concern. I think it will enhance our reputation, I replied confidently. We demonstrated that we can handle unexpected situations with grace and professionalism. Word will spread that the Grand Heritage provides excellent service even during challenging circumstances. As I prepared to return to my suite, Paula approached me hesitantly. She'd changed out of her wedding gown into a simple blue dress, and her face showed the exhaustion of emotional turmoil. Margaret, could we talk privately for a few minutes? I nodded and led her to a quiet corner of the lobby where we could speak without being overheard. I owe you an apology, Paula began quietly. Not just for tonight, but for years of terrible behavior. I've been cruel and selfish, and I never realized how much damage I was causing. I studied her face, looking for signs of genuine remorse versus manipulative damage control. What changed your mind about our relationship? Seeing Kenneth's reaction tonight. Watching someone I love look at me with disappointment and disgust. Realizing that my own husband doesn't trust me anymore because of how I've treated the people closest to me. Paula's voice became more emotional as she continued. I always thought I was the successful one, the one people admired and wanted to be around. But tonight I realized that all my social connections are superficial. I don't have real friends who would stand by me during difficult times. I don't have professional accomplishments or financial independence. Everything I thought made me special was just borrowed from other people. And what about our parents' role in all of this? They were wrong too. They taught me that being pretty and popular was more important than being kind or accomplished. They made me believe I deserved special treatment just for existing, while you had to work for every bit of recognition you received. I appreciated her acknowledgement, but decades of hurt couldn't be erased by a single conversation. Apologies are meaningful, Paula, but they don't undo the damage that's been done. You and our parents spent years convincing me I was worthless. That kind of psychological damage takes time to heal. I understand, Paula replied. I don't expect forgiveness right away. I just wanted you to know that I finally see the truth about our family dynamics and my own behavior. What happens with Kenneth? Paula's expression became pained. I don't know. He says he needs time to decide if he can trust me again. He's staying with his parents tonight instead of in our hotel room. Our honeymoon is canceled. Despite everything Paula had done to me over the years, I felt sympathy for her situation. Losing your marriage on your wedding day was devastating regardless of the circumstances that led to it. Relationships can recover from betrayal if both people are willing to do the work, I offered. But it requires complete honesty and genuine change, not just temporary remorse. I know. I have a lot of growing up to do. We stood in awkward silence for a few moments before Paula spoke again. The hotel really is beautiful. You've created something remarkable here. Thank you. It's been a challenging but rewarding investment. I'm proud of you, Margaret. I should have said that years ago, but I'm saying it now. Coming from Paula, those words carried more weight than I'd expected. I appreciate that. As Paula walked away to find Kenneth and attempt damage control for her marriage, I reflected on the complex emotions the evening had generated. I'd achieved my goal of forcing my family to acknowledge my success and confront their years of mistreatment. But the victory felt more bittersweet than triumphant. I took the private elevator back to my penthouse suite, where I could process the evening's events in solitude. From my balcony, I could see the city lights stretching toward the horizon, a reminder of the broader world beyond family dysfunction and childhood wounds. The scars on my face and arm would always be visible reminders of the fire that had changed everything. But tonight had proven that those scars didn't define my worth or limit my potential. I'd built something meaningful and valuable, despite every obstacle my family had placed in my path. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities. Paula and Kenneth would need to decide if their marriage could survive its foundation of deception. My parents would continue their desperate attempts to rebuild our relationship now that they understood my true success. And I would continue expanding my business empire, finally free from the need to prove myself to people who'd never deserved my efforts in the first place. For the first time in my life, I felt genuinely proud of who I'd become and excited about who I might still become. The little girl who'd saved her sister from a fire had grown into a woman who'd saved herself from a family that never appreciated her true value. Success, I'd learned, wasn't about revenge or proving others wrong. It was about discovering your own worth and building a life that reflected your authentic values and capabilities. Tonight had been the final chapter in my quest for family validation. Tomorrow would be the first chapter in whatever came next. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who underestimated you? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about overcoming family challenges and finding your own path to success. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that their worth isn't determined by how others treat them. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the greatest victory is simply knowing your own value. I hope you find the courage to demand the respect you deserve and the strength to build the life you want regardless of who believes in you along the way.